Okay, boys and girls. I'm going to call the meeting of the Texas Real Estate Commission to order at 10 o'clock on this first day of May 2017, and ask everyone to please rise for the pledges of allegiance by Commissioner Westcott.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated. Commissioner Stevens let me know that she was not attending today, and we have know that Commissioner Martinez is on his way. Had a little issue with his car this morning, and I don't know about Commissioner Alley and Commissioner Turner, so perhaps we would ask for the excused absence of Turner, Stevens, and Alley. Someone please make a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the absences of Stevens, Alley, and Turner. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. I would tell you that we will be moving agenda item 29 up to just after agenda item 8. So 29 is moved to just after 8. That is the audit report. And I would remind everyone in the audience that except for staff reports, we expect you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you have a time that you wish, or an agenda item you wish to make a comment on, there's a form for doing that out in the front, and you will turn it in over here to the lovely lady waving at you, and Amber, and we will do that. So, Commissioner Jones, as a liaison to the Inspector Committee, did you have a recommendation from the committee that interviewed candidates for appointment to the Inspector Committee?
Yes, Madam Chair. We had a meeting last week where we interviewed prospective candidates. I would like to move to the commission that a current member, Stephen Reinhardt from Harker Heights, be reappointed to the Inspector Committee. I would like to move that the appointment of Sean Emmerich from the Houston area be appointed to the Inspector Committee. I would ask, and let me clarify this, that we have changed the terms of the public members to 2 years. The recommendation to move that the reappointment of Matt Hart as a public member from Austin and Barbara Evans as a public member from Fort Worth be reappointed to their second 2-year term. That leaves us with one vacancy for a public member, and I would like to thank Mr. Greg Eakin for his service as an Inspector Committee, appointed in 2011, serving 11 years, and on the Education Subcommittee for his service to the committee and to the Commission.
So there was a lot of words there. So I think you had perhaps a motion that came from yourself to appoint Sean Emmerich to the Inspector Committee for a 6-year term, to reappoint Steve Reinhardt as a inspector member for a 6-year term, to reappoint for 2-year terms Matt Hart and Barbara Evans to public members, and we will have an outstanding third public member appointment to make at some point in time. And that is your motion? Is that what you meant? Okay.
Second.
And there's a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion carries. And yes, let's publicly thank Greg for his service to the Inspector Committee and to our industry. He's not here, but let's show him. It's now time to seek the committee reports. Mr. Olmix, and I believe you're up first.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Welcome to your regular quarterly meeting. Please recall that we are broadcasting live via our website, so be mindful of any side conversations. The microphones are sensitive. We are grateful for the time and energy you give to the citizens of Texas to oversee the important work of the Commission. Thank you for being here to offer your guidance and direction. It is May, and there are 29 days left in the legislative session, which ends on Memorial Day. Today, Tony Slagle, our government affairs specialist, will give you a progress report on the bills that we are tracking that could affect the agency and the public policies that we are required to enforce for the protection of the public. We continue to work with other stakeholders to attempt to ensure that there is no lessening of safeguards for consumers. The Commission's advisory groups, committees, and your staff have been working hard since last you met in February. You will have reports from many of them today, along with some recommendations for action. We hope that the levels of discussion and deliberation to reach these recommendations is sufficient to the task at hand. If it ever needs augmentation, please let us know so that we might improve. A modest number of rules are recommended for adoption or proposal for publication. We anticipate this will increase somewhat, as it usually does, after the legislative session and gubernatorial action. You also have a few items of administrative business to consider today, including the internal audit plan, appointment of investment officers, and the executive director's performance review. There are a few policy discussions on tap, including the appropriate display of disciplinary actions on the website, the influence of new technology on brokerage practices and its implication for regulatory response, and some ways to distinguish the Commission from the trade groups of our stakeholders. And very importantly, you will consider the first draft of the fiscal year 18 agency operating budget as reviewed by the Budget Committee, and have the opportunity to ask any questions about the underlying assumptions that went into its construction. I will be ready to answer any questions or concerns that you may have during that presentation. The continued growth of license application volume and educational offerings approval requests, combined with a rise in complaint volumes, has required us to respond with additional resources to better manage the volume of contacts, that's calls, emails, and walk-in interactions, that result from increases in each of these areas: application volumes, education, and complaints. We are adding staff in our Reception and Communication Services Division, Education Licensing and Services Division, and Standards and Enforcement Services Division to respond to the need for timely action to serve our license holders as promptly and as professionally as we would want to be. So unless you have any questions for me, I will now ask each of the division directors to update you on activities in their areas of responsibility.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. DeAnda?
Good morning, Lori DeAnda, Director of Reception and Communication Services. Before I begin with my staff reports, I have two new team members that I am introducing. First is Ana Sanchez. She began her employment with the agency as a customer service representative on March 20th. She has worked for the state of Texas in the customer service field for nearly 8 years. She studied in communications at the University of Texas in San Antonio. In her spare time, she enjoys dog sitting, reading, and crafting. Ana is thrilled in being part of TREC and TLCB. Please welcome Ms. Sanchez. Michelle Resendez began her employment with the agency as a customer service representative on March 13th. She was born and raised in Austin. Michelle previously worked at Time Warner Cable for 14 years. She began her employment as a customer service representative and was promoted to a billing repair agent support specialist. She graduated with an associate's degree in bilingual business administration. She and her husband have been married for over 20 years and have 3 beautiful daughters. She is also excited to be part of the agency's team. So please welcome Ms. Resendez. Now please refer to the C1 report. For the month of March 2017, we received 78,253 calls, assisted 389 walk-ins, and responded to 14,349 emails. The normal call volume is an average of approximately 20,000 calls per month. You will notice the phone volume has escalated. The large number of calls is in regards to an automated dialing system that repeatedly dialed the TREC main number. We did have the call queue at its maximum level throughout each day, which is 30 calls in queue. The 31st caller received a message that informed them to call back or send an email. This option also created the higher number of emails, which had us with the response time of up to 5 business days. To resolve the problem, we have doubled the effort to reduce the email volume by hiring another team member. Now, I'm happy to inform you that we are currently responding to emails within a 2 business day time frame. The next report is the C2 report. In the month of March 2017, we received 121 surveys. The new website went into effect in February, which also included an update on the surveys. March is the first month that I am able to view all surveys that include surveys without comments. 111 were submitted for TREC and 10 for TLCB. Only 49 were submitted with comments and contact information. The top 3 comment categories involve the TREC website, hold time, email response, and the processing of documents. The email response time and processing of documents received an equal amount of comments. The 49 surveys with comments and contact information have all been resolved. The next report is the C3 report. The numbers for the second quarter are for December 2016 through February 2017. The average length of time it took to complete a call was 19 minutes and 45 seconds, and the average hold time was 9.5 minutes. And this concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Would you just review this automated call system issue you referred to at the beginning of the C1 report?
Yes. When I observed the phone reports, I did notice that there was a discrepancy in the amount of calls that we received. By reviewing them, there was a large number of calls that indicated were called the agency within a certain time period, which was obvious that it was inaccurate. So I informed the information to DIR, which is the Department of Information Resources, that is also the responsible department for our phone system. So when I notified them of the error, they're the ones that informed me that it was an automatic dialing system that continued to call our TREC main number.
Do we know the source of those calls, or?
Unfortunately not. And there's not anything that they can do or we can do. So we're just hoping that those numbers come down.
Did they have any sort of estimation on how many of these calls were the result of this automatic dialing system?
Unfortunately not. It's just an estimation because the average amount of calls that we received monthly, it's an average about 20,000 calls.
Yeah.
So you can see the large difference there.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I believe we have Ms. Sample representing Gwen Jackson today.
Good morning. I'm Denise Sample, the licensing manager, and providing the reports for Education and Licensing Services. If you please draw your attention to the L1 report. The L1 report is the March fiscal year-to-date totals and comparison of applications received, licenses issued from applications, and the renewal activity. We do continue to receive a consistent flow of applications and an increase. We've received 1,113 more applications over this time last year. The total renewal rate for broker and sales licenses is at 78%, a little over 78%. Moving on to the L1A report. This report provides similar information to the previous report, but on the inspector program. The renewal rate for inspector licenses is at 78.22%. We don't see any significant changes on those applications received. Moving on to the L2 report. This report provides the total number of licenses and registrations issued through March of 2017. And as you can see, we've had an increase of sales and broker and sales agents licensed of 8,484 over this time last year. An increase in inspector license holders of 295, for a total increase in all license types of 8,488. Moving on to the next report. This report provides comparisons of fiscal year-to-date exam activity for real estate and inspectors. And we've seen the first attempt pass rate for sales agents increase from 50% to 51.4%. For brokers, an increase of 51.2 to 53%. For real estate inspectors, we've seen an increase in the first attempt pass rate from 27.8% to 37%, and from 48.8% to 47.8%, a slight decrease there. And moving on to the L4 report. This provides the number of approved instructors for our real estate and inspector courses. The numbers along the far right column show the totals through March of 2017. And we are pleased to see a continued increase in the number of approved instructors for the ride-along inspector course. And if there are no questions, that concludes my report.
Anyone have a question from Sample? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Mark Moore, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services. The first report up is the case status report. We've been keeping this report in pretty much the same format since around September 2010, and the numbers are comparatively sort of very high. If you look at the, can you scroll up to the top part, please, Amber? There you go. If you look at the received during month, 480 for March 2017, those are extremely high numbers. We've never seen anything like that. We've had about 14 months of really high cases coming in, and obviously we can't control the input, we can control the output some, but not the input. So if you look at the output, we had 319 cases closed, so our productivity has been very good. But I did want to go into these open cases a bit more, what we think is going on here. One, if you look at the first line item of broker sales, that's at 112. That's a really high number. These are the cases that involve what you probably think of as basically real estate related cases. Someone complaining about their real estate agent or an inspector or something, or this wouldn't be an inspector, but something like that. So that's a big increase probably because there's a lot of transactions in the state going on now. The biggest area, though, by far, is the line items of application investigation and MCD inquiry. As you may remember, MCD stands for moral character determination. For $50, someone can ask to have their moral character looked at, like they had a DWI from 15 years ago, a judgment, outstanding student loan, whatever it is, they have a concern, and we will analyze that based on the information they provide. There's been a significant increase in that area. Those aren't particularly time-consuming. The biggest area, though, is still application investigations, which are almost all criminal history, as alluded to by all the three previous speakers here on the staff reports. We have a huge number of applications coming in, so that's increased that number greatly. We're taking some actions to address this. Again, we can't control the input, but we're taking some actions to address these huge numbers. One, we've added a program specialist, shifted over program specialists from existing resources to handle application investigations, the criminal history, since a lot of it actually doesn't even require a lawyer. It's just looking at charts and flow charts to determine where someone lies and whether they deserve a license or not. The other thing we're doing is we're posting for a lawyer, and that'll be done either today or tomorrow. And that'll also help with the caseload as well. This has gone on about 14 months, so we figured it was time to take action. On the good news, in addition to our high productivity, if you look at the next report, One reason I hadn't really panicked on some of this stuff is because you never know how long these trends are going to be. Because as recently as 15 months ago, we had low numbers. But the thing that kind of made me a little happy and kept me from sort of panicking on these high numbers was we have stayed on top of old cases. So this report is actually very, very good, our case aging report. We only had one case over 2 years old. That case settled last month. Of the 3 cases that are in 18 to 24 months, which isn't super old anyway, 2 of those cases will be gone by this month. And then only one of those will probably shift over into the next column. So this report's remaining pretty good. If you look at the cases within the last year, they were 94% or less than a year old. A lot of those actually are these application investigations as opposed to the more traditional real estate complaints. Going on to the next report, we've modified this report to change the colors and make it a little more appealing to the eye, we hope. We also added, there was a request last meeting to add some more information on this first pie chart page. So we added some of the numbers from the allegations below. So we hope that's a little more helpful there on one spot because we're trying to pack a lot of information there. The detail on the next page, that hasn't really changed. We did add a total column on the allegations to provide a little more data, and it should match up to the previous page where this gives you some raw numbers where you can kind of see how much fluctuation there is from month to month on the individual items. Are there any questions on this report or the previous 2 reports? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Spiropoulos.
Good morning. Steve Spiropoulos, Director of Information and Technology Services Division. Before I go into my reports, I'd like to talk about 2 things. As you've heard from my colleagues, we have increased volumes throughout on different inputs. So that would be license applications, phone calls, cases. And I'd like you to know that we in the ITS division are taking steps to build tools to look at our existing systems and find ways to create efficiencies. So one of the things that we did over the last quarter was to clear up some of the issues with the online licensing system that were there after we upgraded it at the end of last year. So that has greatly improved the performance. We've also looked at putting in a new system for the call center so that there's more services available from the phone system. That is, when people call in and want to talk to someone, there's different features that we can implement there to improve their experience. So we're looking to improve that customer experience. Do you have any questions about that, or should I get on to my reports? Okay. So the I-1 report here is for March of 2017. We had increases in total pages viewed over the previous fiscal year to date. The total monthly unique visitors numbers are not reflected for this fiscal year to date total because when we changed over from the old website to the new website, there was a period of time where we were unable to capture those statistics. So until February of next year, there's going to be some missing numbers, but once we've crossed over that, everything will look good. We've had increases in online utilization for applications and renewals. Applications is now at 81.5% from 79.2%, and renewals are at 96.8% from 92.3%. Significant progress. On our sponsorship transactions, we had increases for additions, but a slight decrease for removals, and that was due to a large number of removals having been sent in on paper at one period of time. So once that goes away as well, we'll balance out. And then the I-2 report shows us on the application side that we are steady above 80% for applications submitted online. And for renewals, we are above 95% for the month of March and continuing on that trend of high online utilization. The relationship management tool is also looking at a very high online utilization of above 90% for the last month. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pifo?
So good morning. Priscilla Pifo, Director of Staff and Support Services, and I'm here to present the TREC year-to-date budget, operating budget, and investment reports. Our first report is a 2017 budget status report. You can see that as we are 7 months through our fiscal year, which begins in September, the percentage of budget remaining should be around 41%, and we are well within that parameter. While some line items are up and some are down, the overall effect is about where we would expect to be. And as has been our trend, revenue continues to run ahead of where we had projected, about 10% at this point. And that concludes my report of the budget status report, unless there are questions. We'll move on to the investment report. Our investment reports start with the operating account 3055 on page 26. You'll notice that we had an investment mature March 15, which we reinvested March 31st. Due to the timing of the investment, the bank showed the $1 million transaction in the investment report as well as at the bottom in our cash, which is why you see an entry below under reserved for investment because of the timing of the investment, but it's not being double counted. Moving on to S2. Shows our investments for the recovery fund, number 3058, which is a similar investment depiction of $350,000, matured on March 15th, and is reinvested at $399. The investment is similarly reported with a timing issue. Our next report shows the recovery trust fund payments and repayments, and the total amount that has been paid over the last 10 years. And then our final report is the real estate inspection recovery fund, which shows investments of $549,600, maturity dates of August and December in 2017, with a reserve for potential payments of $25,000. I'll be happy to entertain any questions at this point.
See none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Westcott, are you going to make a report for the Budget Committee?
Yes, Madam Chairman. So Commissioner Stevens, Commissioner Martinez, and I all discussed the budget individually with staff, and I think you've heard from everyone today as they made committee reports that there has been a rather dramatic increase in demand on the system. And this budget, I believe, reflects that demand, but notwithstanding the increase in resources, I believe this is a very conservative budget. I've always appreciated that staff has drafted conservative budgets and that they always overestimate expenses and underestimate revenue. And I believe that this budget provides adequate revenue to meet existing obligations. The increase in resources is in response to legitimate increase in demands and is part of making investments to ensure that we are able to provide the level of service that license holders expect. I have full confidence in Priscilla, Aretha, and Doug that this budget reflects what is needed and not one penny more. That's my report.
Are there any questions of Commissioner Westcott or anyone else regarding the budget? I see no one.
There will be a presentation of the budget at which you'll have the opportunity to ask specific questions, if you like, as I go through some of the underlying assumptions that are here and explanations. So that'll happen at a future agenda item.
Are we good? Okay. Who is making the report for the Enforcement Committee? Are you doing that?
I can do it, or Commissioner Ariaga, would you like to do it?
Don't have anything in front of me.
Good morning, Carrie Lewis, General Counsel. The Enforcement Committee met at the end of March, and their first order of business was to hear 3 motions for rehearing. They heard all 3. All had written petitions from staff and from the respondent, and all were denied. We had hearings on 2 of them, and one of them was just the filed paperwork. Then the Enforcement Committee discussed whether or not disciplinary action for a probationary license, so that's if you had criminal history and your license was granted on a probationary basis, how long that should stay on the Commission's website on the disciplinary action, and that is an item that's on the agenda today for discussion and possibly a policy decision. And then lastly, they looked at Rule 541.1, which talks about the criteria for what constitutes a crime that directly relates to the profession, and that is something they're going to be working on this summer and coming up with some suggestions and rule amendments to bring forward to this body.
Any questions? We have 2 members of the committee. Anything you want to add to that report? Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Are you also doing the Education Standards Advisory Committee?
The education.
Just stay.
Chairwoman Susan Jones could not be here today, asked me to give this report. The Education Standards Advisory Committee met in April, and they continue to make strides towards improving education for our license holders. First on the agenda, they had a discussion on the topic of approval of qualifying instructors, had a productive discussion about if an instructor who only teaches distance education courses should be able to count a current CDEI certification for that requirement. After reviewing the merits of the online CDEI course, the committee determined that there was additional value for all instructors to take the in-person adult education training course at this time, and the committee recommends moving forward to adopt the rule as it has been proposed today at your meeting. The committee did not receive any comments on proposed rules relating to qualifying real estate courses and responsibilities and operations of providers, and they recommend adoption of those rules as proposed as well. The committee also discussed content guidelines and procedures for designating equivalent qualifying courses for real estate investment, real estate appraisal, real estate law, and residential inspection for real estate agents. I presented a recommendation to move the related course criteria for a broker's license from Rule 535.64 to Rule 535.56, which deals with broker qualifications, education, and experience, and the committee approved this recommendation for that change, and there will be a proposal before you today on that. The committee then reviewed and discussed the content outlines and proposed content draft guidelines presented by staff, and after review and discussion, they made several changes to those guidelines, and those guidelines with the corresponding course approval forms will be before you for proposal today. Finally, the committee also agreed that on a procedure for recommending a course as a designated equivalent for a qualifying course, and that would be to have that course come before the committee for review. The next meeting is set for July 24th at 10 a.m., and that concludes the report.
Thank you. Any questions for the Education Standards Advisory Committee? Nope. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Slagle? Oh, let the record show that Commissioner Martinez arrived from his harrowing trip from San Antonio. We're glad you're here.
May the record reflect that I overcame 2 police officers, 2 tow trucks, and 1 change of vehicle.
Wow. Wow. It's a story for the break.
Let the record also reflect he would have been late either way.
Ouch. Mr. Slagle, are you making a report for the Inspector Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Back to the business at hand.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Tony Slagle. I'm the Government Affairs person and the agency liaison to the Inspector Committee. The Inspector Committee Chair, Diana Rose, could not make it this morning, so she asked that I give the report in her stead. I'll make it brief. Since the last commission meeting, the full Inspector Committee met on April 3rd. At that meeting, the committee reviewed the inspector-related rules that were proposed at the February commission meeting. The majority of those dealt with the new approach to the 8 hours of required SOP and legal ethics update. The committee reviewed those and they're recommended for approval at this meeting on a later agenda. Committee also discussed clarifying the process for awarding CE credit to inspectors for courses and presentations offered by exempt providers. And the Education Subcommittee has a meeting scheduled for Friday, May 19th to discuss those matters further. And the full committee's next meeting is scheduled for Monday, July 17th. That concludes my report if anyone has any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Slagle about the Inspector Committee? Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now, as previously mentioned, hear agenda item 29, which is the audit. Folks.
Good morning. I was also stuck in traffic, so I apologize for being late and just walking in. I'm here with myself, Darlene Brown from McConnell Jones. We are your internal auditors, and I have to my right Jose Reyes. He's also with McConnell and Jones. We have before you on page, if we could go ahead and slide to page 11 of the slides, which is, I believe, slide 134 in your presentation. We conducted our comprehensive risk assessment, which included interviewing staff, a survey to all staff in the agency, and reviewing documentation, which included strategic plans and prior audit reports and policies and procedures. And from that, we rated all your risks, and we came up with a 3-year audit plan. So we propose in year 1 to do an audit of the information technology area. And that was because your IT and your financial systems rated extremely high in the risk rating system. And then the second audit that we propose to do this year is the Public and Funds Investment Act, and that's the compliance where you need to have this audit conducted every 2 years. And then in year 2, we propose on conducting an audit of the human resources area. That was another high-risk area. And then in year 3, we propose the financial reporting audit, and that will be as a follow-up to the information technology audit that we're proposed to conduct this year. And then again in year 3 would be the Public Funds Investment Act. Across all 3 years, we will do audit activities as requested around the residential service company financial statement and report reviews. We'll also follow up on prior audit findings and then complete an updated risk assessment every year. So what we are requesting from you today is to approve the first year audit plan where we would conduct the IT audit and the Public Funds Investment Act audit. And should you approve that, there is a document that you would need to sign, and then we submit to the oversight bodies. And I will be happy to answer any questions you might have concerning the risk assessment or the proposed audit plan.
Are there any questions for Ms. Brown? Commissioner Arriaga?
Madam Chair.
Get the mic.
There'll be 3 extra audits, is that correct?
3 extra audits. We have in our budget up to reviewing 3 or 4 financial reports of the RSC companies, depending on the need.
The question, I guess, would be how much more money we're going to need for the
No, this
audits?
is all within the budget.
All together within the budget? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for Ms. Brown? Or Mr. Reyes? Sorry. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, may I move that the commission approve the Texas Real Estate Commission Annual Internal Audit Plan 2017 as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to go. Okay, at this time, I would ask if there are any people here who have a general comment on a non-agenda item. Are there any visitors who have a comment they need to make on a non-agenda item? Okay. Then the commission will go into executive session to discuss pending litigation, to obtain advice and legal counsel on agenda items pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071 and personnel matters pursuant to the Texas Government Code 551.074 for about a half an hour, which will take us, we'll just go ahead and say 35 minutes to 11:15 We hope. We are out of here. Okay, we call the meeting back to order at 12:47, and everyone will pay attention now and hear from our attorneys on agenda item 11, the recovery fund cases.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, before you in agenda item 11 are 3 recovery fund cases. The first one, item A, is recovery fund case number 17-007, Hajamati versus Premier Properties Realty, Inc., and Daniel Dimitri.
Commissioner Martinez, I believe you had a motion on this one?
Yes, on 1707, I'd like to recommend that to authorize settlement and payment of $19,594.89 plus a 5% post-judgment interest to be calculated on the $18,533.66 as awarded in the judgment.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries.
The next case before you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, is 17-008, Majors versus Region Realty Incorporated and Fowler.
Commissioner Arriaga.
Madam Chair, in RF number 17-008, I move that we authorize settlement of $5,816,000, including court costs plus 5% post-judgment interest.
$5,816 plus 5%. Okay, just being clarity. Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion carries.
And the last item before you in recovery fund cases is item IRF 17-001, Ward versus Dugan. This is an inspector recovery fund case.
Mr. Commissioner Jones?
I'd like to recommend that staff has authorized a payment of $12,500, the maximum allowed for this claim, on IRF 17-001.
Motion, do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 12. Are you staying? No. Ms. Lewis.
Carrie Lewis, General Counsel, will now move to the rules for possible adoption. Starting with agenda item 12, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC 535.5, license not required, and to new TAC section 535.6, equitable interest in real property. The amendments were published in a March issue of the Texas Register, and they removed the provisions regarding selling and buying equitable interests in property from the license not require rule and create a new rule dealing with equitable interest in property disclosures and the circumstances under which buying and selling equitable interest will and will not require a real estate license. There were 2 comments received on this proposal as published. One commenter supported the proposal, but wanted an additional rule that requires anyone who intends to enter into an option or contract to purchase with the intent to resell to disclose that intention to the seller. And the second commenter wanted to make the Commission aware of the practice of license holders listing option agreements for sale in MLS for themselves or others. Staff recommends adopting the amendments as published. The additional requirement of trying to, by rule, decide someone's intention at the time that they make the contract, it's just not very feasible or enforceable.
Okay. Are there any questions? Then, who's paying attention? Commissioner Westcott, you got this?
Madam Chairman, I have a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to TAC Section 22, or 22 TAC Section 535. Am I on the wrong one?
No, you're good.
Yeah, that's right. 0.5, yeah, 0.5. Sorry. Thanks, Doug. It's easy to get screwed around here, guys.
It's on page 35 of 178.
Thank you, yeah. 22 TAC Section 535.5, license not required, and new Section 535.6, equitable interest in real property as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 13.
Discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.53, Business Entity Designated Broker. The amendments were published in the March 3rd issue of the Texas Register, and they eliminate the word directly when referring to designated broker ownership requirements for a business entity. The amendments will avoid confusion regarding the requirements, since a designated broker may own at least 10% of the business entity through a verified ownership chain in other business entities. No comments were received, and staff recommends adopting the amendments as published.
Commissioner Arriaga, would you make a motion on agenda item 13?
Madam Chair, I move the staff is authorized on behalf of the Commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC subparagraph 535.53, business entity designated broker, as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 14.
Discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.63, approval of instructors of qualifying courses. These amendments were published in the March 3rd issue of the Texas Register, and they clarify that the 3 years of experience in teaching or training applies whether you have a college degree in the subject area or have 5 years of active experience as a license holder, and that the required adult education instructor training class must be taken in person in a classroom setting. The amendments to this section also change references to inspector course names to conform this section with corresponding amendments proposed for section 535.218. No comments were received on the proposal, and staff recommends adoption as published.
Commissioner Martinez, have you got this?
Yes, I'd like to move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 535.63, approval of instructors of qualifying courses as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 15.
Discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.64, content requirements for qualifying real estate courses. The amendments were published in the March 24th issue of the Texas Register and allow credit for an elective qualifying course that is an advanced version of a qualifying course listed in the rule, or a combination course consisting of a variety of subject matter topics from qualifying courses listed in that rule. No comments were received, and staff recommends adoption of the amendments as published.
Commissioner Leonard.
Madam Chair, move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.64, content requirements for qualifying real estate courses, and the form adopted by reference as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 16.
Discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.65, responsibilities and operations of providers of qualifying courses. The amendments were published in the March 3rd issue of the Texas Register and set out additional requirements providers must follow when a classroom course is being delivered to remote locations through the use of technology. The amendments were recommended by the Education Standards Advisory Committee to ensure that live classroom courses are being delivered through the use of technology were properly administered to ensure the students were getting the true equivalent of classroom instruction. No comments were received, and staff recommends adoption as published.
Commissioner Jones.
Madam Chair, move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 535.65, responsibility and operations of providers for qualifying courses as presented to the Texas Registry, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 17, Ms. Warman.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, Agenda Item 17 includes discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 535, Subchapter R as follows. 535.218, Continuing Education Required for Renewal. 535.72, Approval of Non-Elective Continuing Education Courses. 535.74, Approval of Continuing Education Instructors. 535.201, Definitions, and 535.212, Education and Experience Requirements for a License. All of the amendments relate to the changes that you heard Mr. Slagle describe earlier for the Inspector Continuing Education course, the SOP and Legal and Ethic Update. The amendments to 535.218 change the real estate inspector continuing education requirements for this non-elective coursework and include a 4-hour course developed by providers in accordance with a TREC-approved course outline and a 4-hour course developed by the Commission in conjunction with the Texas A&M University Real Estate Center. The amendments to the remaining sections, 535.72, 535.74, 535.201, and 535.212, would conform those sections to the changes to 535.218 for consistency. There were no comments received on the amendments as published, and staff recommends adopting the amendments as published.
Commissioner Westcott.
Madam Chairman, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 535 in any forms adopted by reference as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 18.
Agenda item 18 includes discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 TAC 535.227, Standards of Practice General Provisions. The amendments to this section correct a clerical error that occurred when this section was recently amended as part of a comprehensive review of the standards of practice in Subchapter R. No comments were received on the proposed amendments, and staff recommends adopting the amendments as presented.
Commissioner Arriaga.
Madam Chair, I move that the staff is authorized on behalf of the Commission to submit for adoption the amendments to 22 TAC 535.227, Standards of Practice, General Provisions as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 19.
Agenda item 19 is discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Section 533.8 motions for rehearing. The proposed amendments clarify the ways a motion for rehearing may be filed with the Commission. What we found after the large number of PFDs that we had last time is a lot of attorneys and respondents and applicants didn't understand the process of how to file a motion for rehearing. It's a complicated process. You have to look at the APA and civil rules of procedure, so we thought we would just spell it out, make it easy for everybody.
Okay. And I'm looking at Commissioner Martinez.
Yes, I'd like to move that staff is authorized on behalf of the Commission to submit the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 533.8, motions for rehearing as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 20.
Discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.53 Business Entity Designated Broker. The proposed amendments clarify the authorized position by type of entity to alleviate confusion for applicants. This is a question we get a lot, so we're just clarifying that a corporation has an officer, an LLC has a manager or a managing member, and a partnership has a general partner.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonard.
Move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit the proposed amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.53 Business Entity designated broker, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Motion, a second?
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 21. And I have a speaker on this. So after you present, we will ask for our speaker.
Discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.56, Education and Requirement for a Broker's License. The proposed amendments relocate the complete list of course options for the 630 related classroom hours for a broker's license from 535.64C for greater clarity for applicants and providers. The Education Standards and Advisory Committee recommended this proposal.
Ms. Santa Maria, I have you down for 3 minutes. I'll not start the time till you make it to the podium.
Good morning, Rita Santa Maria, owner, Champion School of Real Estate. I want to speak to agenda item 21. I'm in favor, but I would also like for the commission to consider some additional courses. Sales agents who do not have any college hours should still be able to use other nationally approved courses, such as those approved through the AQB Appraisal Qualifying Board, through the Appraisal Foundation in Washington, D.C., and our own TALCB in Texas. Courses approved by the NMLS, the National Mortgage Lending Society, Washington, D.C. The 8 hours CE through NMLS, these are all applicable to real estate brokerage and through specific college course credit hours and through those agencies that have approved those so that providers like myself at Champion School of Real Estate can offer them. The TREC Professional Inspector approved courses have been accepted in the past as well for elective credit. And those courses such as specifically report writing, SOP, communication, professional practice, red flags on property inspections were accepted as elective hours towards broker's hours for broker licensing. All of the above have historically been accepted by TREC for persons needing to accumulate 630 hours for a broker's license, but in the most recent months have been refused as the TREC computers were denying their legitimacy because they do not come across on a standard TREC certificate, but instead are on the certificates of the corresponding national and state certifying agencies. I was told I could resubmit in the TREC format all of the above courses to be evaluated by TREC staff as to their legitimacy as an elective. That was our only alternative. These courses have already received the critical eye review of the AQB, the NMLS, both national agencies in Washington, D.C., and the inspection courses evaluated by TREC staff. I would ask that TREC recognize these national agencies and the legitimacy of their approval process so we are not having to resubmit for TREC staff separate guidelines that they, as you know, have adopted and brought forward to us as providers. This is very time-consuming, laborious on all sides. Please add these national and state approved courses to the list of college and university acceptable elective credit courses for a broker candidate. This will allow our non-college candidates the opportunity to accumulate and achieve the total hours for a broker's license. To repeat myself, in the past, our broker candidates who took these courses had them consistently accepted towards elective hours. It has only been most recently that these certificates have been turned back to the candidate. Any questions?
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that you, when you were able, attend the meetings of the Education Standards Advisory
Yes.
Committee because it's near and dear to your heart. Did you bring this up to them?
To the ESAC meeting?
Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And their
We
objection
actually
was?
had a separate meeting with Carrie and Jennifer and Gwen, and we discussed it. And I thought that we had an understanding. My staff remembers it, that Carrie said, I don't know when we stopped doing that, accepting these. And then most recently, a number of my broker candidates had their certificates returned. So I brought it forward again to staff and was told, no, nobody really remembers that conversation as it was. So that's why I thought, since we are opening up the rule, the proposed rule, and adding these specific college courses that a lot of our agent candidates did not attend college, that it was a good time to bring these forward. Because as it reads, a CCIM course would not be approved as an elective for a broker's license, and those need to be added.
And so you brought it up with staff, but not at the
Yes.
ESAC meeting?
It was brought up in the ESAC meeting in January, yes.
And they rejected it?
No, they just said that's good information. It was never, let's vote on it. It was just brought up for information purposes. And then we had a separate meeting with Carrie, and we brought it up again. There were about 7 of us.
I have a question. This is, it's good information. It's very, it's timely. I'd like to ask if we can have this on an agenda item for our next meeting and get some input from ESAC and take a look at this as a commission. We would not hold up this motion today, but we would look at this as a possible amendment to this motion at our next time. That way we could
This is for adoption, though.
But we're going to adopt this.
This is a proposal.
It's
Yeah, we're down to
proposed.
proposal.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we can do all that.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking we were still in the adoption phase.
Right.
So that's fine. Can't we move forward and then let them look at it, make a recommendation that ESAC consider this possibility?
And of course, we'd like to know any historical,
Yeah.
whatever took place.
Yes, we can do that, and since it would be more inclusive, it would be more options available, it would be not considered a substantive change, so we would still be able to go forward
At the next meeting.
at the next meeting
Even
if
if we made those
ESAC
changes.
recommends that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Santa Maria, for bringing that to our attention. Okay, 21, it's your turn, Jones, I think.
I'm sorry. Is it this?
Yeah, 21. 21. Agenda item 21.
21, oh, I'm sorry.
Page 87.
We're getting there.
Madam Chair, move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit the proposed amendment to 22 TAC 535.56, education and requirements for a broker's license as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
A motion to have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. 22.
Discussion and possible action to propose amendments to Section 535.64, content requirement for qualifying real estate courses, and I believe you have a new sheet that was passed out this morning for this agenda item. The motion was revised. The proposed amendments add course content guidelines for real estate appraisal, real estate investment, real estate law, and residential inspection for real estate agents, and then relocates the list of course options for the 630 related hour that you just proposed for Section 535.56. The Education Standards and Advisory Committee recommended this proposal, and it includes the rule and the related forms that will be adopted by reference.
We're not finding an add-on in any of our papers here.
Oh, you'll hand it to me. Okay, sorry, my mistake. It was just handed to me.
Yay.
So the change was that in the motion, we just need to make sure that we are proposing the amendments along with the forms adopted by reference. That is the only change.
And
amendments.
forms,
I got it.
because that's good, because it's your turn.
Forms adopted by reference.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Westcott.
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this commission to submit the proposed amendments along with forms adopted by reference to 22 TAC Section 535.64, content requirements for qualifying real estate courses as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. 23.
Discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Section 535.91, renewal of real estate license. The proposed amendments establish a deadline for submission of an application and supporting documentation to be considered a timely filing for business entities. This will allow time for review by staff and the opportunity for curing any deficiencies by the entity prior to the license expiration date. It also clarifies the authorized positions by type of entity and sets out the statutory requirement that the entity be authorized to transact business in Texas in the list of what is required for renewal for greater clarity for the license holder.
Yes, sir.
On agenda item 23, page 105, I move that the staff is authorized on behalf of the commission to submit the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 535.91, renewal of real estate license as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 24, Mr. Slagle, is that you? And this is the legislative update document that was laid on table, it's on your table when you got here. Looks like
Yes,
this.
ma'am. Yes,
Ta-da.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. This is, I presented you the most recent, it was updated this morning, legislative report, updated with actions that have been taken. If it's okay with the commission, since it's lengthy, I'd like to just focus on those issues that directly impact our license holders. And then if you have any additional questions with any of the other things on the report, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to answer those later if that's all right. Or if you have any questions that I can answer after this as well. The first set of bills I'd like to talk about amend Chapter 1101 of the Occupations Code, and they both deal with issues concerning the selling or offering of equitable interests in real property, identifiers that are required in advertising for brokers and sales agents, and the potential construction of a building in the Capitol complex. The first one is HB 2534. That bill was voted out of committee, I believe, last week. It contains all the provisions I mentioned. The Senate companion, which is SB 2212 by Senator Hancock, was voted out of the Senate as substituted without the language referring to the construction of a building in the Capitol complex. Those bills will at some point cross paths, and a vehicle, one of them will become the vehicle of passage, and then we'll have a final version that will contain all of those provisions likely, but we're not certain yet. The next set of bills I'd like to talk
Mr.
about.
Slagle, could I say something to the commissioners before you
Yes, ma'am.
move forward?
Apologize.
On 11.0, the changes to 11.01, both the House bill and the Senate bill, if you were to read just the bill, you need to actually get 11.01 in front of you and insert the language into what is being proposed as changes to the identifier, so you're really clear on what that bill says, because the bill doesn't quote what the existing law is, it only quotes the changes. Right. And it's a little confusing if you don't realize that.
Right, and that's a good point with all of these, because when you're looking at a bill, they're just addressing the changes that are being recommended, and if you need to look at it in context to really understand the things. So the next set of bills, or the next set of bills, I apologize. Yes, I apologize. Are HB 2684 by Burns and SB 740 by Senator Colkhorst. These sort of came to our attention late last week. These are both bills dealing with various eminent domain issues, and part of that process, someone took a look at our right-of-way agents that we licensed and decided they wanted to possibly address some issues or some concerns in terms of consumer notice, as well as some additional education requirements dealing with eminent domain with our right-of-way agents. And so the House office contacted us, and and asked us to provide some language to them, which we did. And the Senate passed a bill out with language in it, but it wasn't exactly what we had offered to the House. So we reached out to the Senate office and gave them what we had proposed, and they appreciated that. And it's likely that language will be incorporated in whatever they have moving forward. They're not companions; they deal with different issues, but the language that we provided them is the same. So whatever comes out of that. Likely, if that passes, there'll be some additional education requirements for ERW agents, and it's possible that will be a licensing scheme rather than a registration scheme, which it currently is under the current statute. So, all righty. The next bill deals with changes to Chapter 1303 of the Occupations Code, which is the RSC Registration Act. We've been working with various stakeholders on that bill to provide clarification on various issues, as well as some confidentiality issues we need to address. That bill is still a work in progress. You can see from the update that it is moving, but we're continuing to work with the stakeholders to address outstanding issues that they have or that we have in terms of being able to administer the changes in the statute. So I will continue to update the commission on where that bill goes as well. The next set of bills are dealing with changes to Chapter 1104 of the Occupation Code, which is the AMC Act. Those are companions, and the only significant difference between those two bills is that the Senate version was passed out without some minor edits that we needed to make in a clarifying substitute. Those have been presented on the House version. So again, those two bills will cross at some point, and likely the final version will have those minor tweaks we had in the substitute for the House side. And then finally, in terms of things that directly impact the agency, there is some recommended changes to Chapter 1105 that's part of a broad SDSI bill to try to make all the reporting requirements in these various SDI statutes the same, provide some clarity in what's required and what's not. That bill has been voted out of the Senate and is waiting a assignment to a House committee. Two other issues I'd like to just mention while I'm up here before anyone has any questions is there, as I mentioned last time, I believe it was last time I mentioned there's a bill that repeals the provision in the government code dealing with the mortgage fraud task force. We have provided some text to both of the authors to make sure that even if the task force goes away, the members of that task force, the agencies, can still share information, and that language has been incorporated into both versions of the bill. So hopefully, if that does happen, we'll still be able to share information and deal with mortgage fraud. And then I also wanted to address just the two bills that deal with mandatory price disclosure. As I mentioned in the February meeting, one is actually requires mandatory price disclosure. The other one requires the comptroller to do an impact study. Neither of those bills they've both been assigned to committees, but neither of them have been heard in committee yet. So again, I know this is a lengthy report. If you have any questions about anything else, I'm happy to answer them now. But otherwise, I'm happy to address anything at a later date.
Are there any questions for Mr. Slagle on his report? Thank you so much. Appreciate you paying attention and reading all that material. Agenda item 25.
Agenda item 25 is discussion and possible action regarding display of probationary license, agree order on the disciplinary action page of the website. The Enforcement Committee met in March, and they recommend that the Commission adopt a policy that once a license holder who is granted a probationary license due to a background criminal history issue completes that probationary term, that the agreed order reflecting the probationary status no longer be shown on the disciplinary history page of the Commission website. Currently, all agreed orders and final orders stay on the Commission's website for 10 years, which is our record retention policy.
Where am I? Yes, Commissioner Westcott.
Madam Chairman, I have a motion. Move that an agreed order granting a probationary license due to a background history issue be displayed on the disciplinary action page of the Commission's website only until the probationary term is completed.
Second.
I have a question.
Okay.
So will it be displayed anywhere?
It will always be available for the 10-year retention period through an open records request.
Okay, So that was all? You got your question answered? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Whoa, I got a no. Motion still carries. Agenda item 26.
Discussion and possible action regarding appointment of agency investment officers. The Texas Government Code requires each agency that invests funds to designate one or more officer or employees of the agency to act as investment officer and be responsible for the investment of its funds consistent with the investment policy adopted by the agency. That staff is recommending that that designation be given by position in the agency rather than by a named individual. That position should be designated, the positions that we recommend be designated are the Director of Staff and Support Services and the Chief Accountant.
Commissioner Arriaga?
Madam Chair, on item 26, I move that the commission appoints the agency director of staff and support services and chief accountant serve as the agency's investment officers.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 27. Is that where we are? Okay. We have had a performance review done by commissioners. Some of the commissioners participated, and also some of the board members, which means that not everybody turned it in. And at a later date, the chairman of the appraisal board and I will meet with Mr. Olmixon to discuss his performance, and it's at this time that we look at or discuss whether or not we choose to make any changes to salaries for the executive director. And most everything was good. No, his review was, he was rated fairly high. So I'm looking for a motion from someone on the commission for something. Commissioner Jones?
Madam Chair, may I move that this commission adopt a 4% increase for the executive director effective August the 1st, 2017, based on this review and comments received from other commissioners.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, I think it's, as chair of the budget committee, I think it's important for us to point out that we're very, very attuned to making sure that we're competitive as an agency and that we're retaining staff and that we're properly assessing people's performance. So I look forward to making sure that while we're also looking at top to bottom as far as employment numbers, because one of the things that's really been a concern for us as commissioners is retention of our staff and also making sure that workload is maintained in a due process sort of a time frame. And so those are things that we're looking at on a regular and routine basis, and we want to make sure that we're doing things appropriately. So,
okay.
That's all.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, just one other brief comment as I may. I expressed this in the executive committee, but I would also like to see that in the future we get comments and compiled data from some of the staff that work closest with Doug on their assessment of his performance. That'll, I think, better able us and able to evaluate his performance overall.
And the commissioners are aware, and just so the rest of you are aware, the senior staff did answer a questionnaire regarding the performance of the executive director. We were going to share that information with him during his review. We did not compile it in a way and make it available to the commissioners. So the data is available. We will probably look at compiling it, what the senior staff had to say, and share that later. So any other comments on this motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Motion carries. Did you have something else you want to say now or later, Commissioner Jones?
Well, is this an appropriate time to discuss the proposed fiscal 2018 budget?
We're just fixing to be. So let's just move to 28, shall we? Are you on that?
I am.
Okay.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, under Agenda Item 28, I would like to make a brief explanation of this draft of the budget and some of the details, the underlying assumptions that go into it. And then, of course, it'll be available to answer any questions. So under the Commission's budget policy, of course, this process starts in March of each year. And we, at that point, we have 6 months of actual data based on the current budget, the expenditures that are made, and the revenues that we have available for the current year. So we have actual numbers through the end of February, so September through February. And then, of course, we have to project for the balance of those 6 months. That's to give us draft 1 of the budget. Going forward, we will do the same thing at the end of May for draft 2 of the budget. And at that point, we will have as well March, April, and May data. So we'll have 9 months of actual data, expenses and income, and then we only have to project 3 months worth. So much tighter, closer to real-time numbers. And then, of course, in November of each year, we report to you the actual numbers for the prior budget year based on 12 months of actual data, both income and expenses, as we close the year out at the end of August. So this is draft 1. So it is based on actual numbers as of 2/28/2017 and estimated for 6 months. The principal thing that I would like to, 2 things that that are underlying assumptions. One is that we attempt to be very conservative in that if there's a potential for an expense, we include it in the draft budget, even if it turns out it's only 50% likely. So we tend to be high on expenses. We also, of course, we have been blessed at the Commission to have a significant number of new license holders. This will be our 3rd year in a row where we are, even today, we're at about 8,000 increase in license holders over last year. And previous year was 9,000, and previous year was 9,000 and change over the prior year. So we have this upward trend that continues. So we're 6 months through the year, and we're at 8,000 already, comparative month to month, or excuse me, year to date versus year to date. So we anticipate we will continue that. So that gives us in some ways, it gives us a false picture. If we took last year as the baseline and said, well, we're going to do at least that much, we would be overly optimistic. So we essentially take last year's number and then discount it by about 10% on license revenue. Education revenue, we're much more able to predict that based on course expiration dates and things like that. So we try to be very conservative on the income side, and of course that has enabled us over the past few years to accumulate overages, which you have assigned to specific reserves on behalf of the agency, and that you'll find on page 2 of this draft budget, the back side, if you will, of those pages. In the budget, or excuse me, let me say, for this year, looking forward for 2018, because of the dramatic increase in the number of applications, in the number of calls and emails to the agency, as well as the number of complaints, I have already authorized out of the current year's budget in FY 2017 the addition of 3 FTEs, one in the reception and communication services, one in education licensing services, and one in standards and enforcement services to deal with those, with today's reality. Assuming that those continue, we may need, and this budget anticipates reserving additional expense for at least 2 more individuals, one in RCS and one in ELS. So both someone to respond directly to consumers' calls and emails and license holders, as well as an additional person to process applications. So those are factored in to this budget from a projection standpoint. So you'll see the notes say that that it's an increase of 5%. That does not equate to everybody gets a 5% raise. It just happens to be 5% more than last year with all of these calculations in there. But it does account for some things that we are attempting to do, which is to remain significantly competitive. And so we are especially sensitive to the cost of living raises here in Austin, the cost of living in Austin. And so we've been raising the floor, if you will. And we will continue to do that. We anticipate we will do another cost of living adjustment to raise the floor next year as well. That's included in these numbers. For the balance of the budget, you'll see that so the personnel-related numbers are the ones that show significant adjustment. For the balance of it, it's almost flat. The costs related to all of the other initiatives and all the other expense categories. If you add those all together, it's basically flat. We talked about the fees. The back side has to do with reserves, and so we anticipate, one, of course, we assign the dedicated reserves. We anticipate being able to reserve near to the floor of the operating reserve. So by policy, we should have at least 3 months of operating expenses and not more than 4 months. And in prior years, we have reserved closer to the ceiling, closer to 4 months. But because we've had significant increases in revenue, we think it's very safe to say we could reserve near the bottom and still be in good shape. So that's what this projects going forward, that we would have operating reserves of about 3 months. And that allows us to project that we can assign to other reserves, especially the long-term facilities master plan, potentially another $2.7 million this year. That would bring us to about $11 million in that particular reserve. There are no other highlights that I need to bring to your attention, but I am happy to address any concerns that you have on this first draft, knowing that you will all see prior to the August meeting, when we do the end of May numbers, so we have 9 months of actual and 3 months of projected, that will go to the budget committee for a meeting, and once they are satisfied, it will actually go to the full commission. Same thing we do with the board as well. So you will have it, you will not have to wait until the August meeting to see the next draft of this budget. Okay?
Okay. I think the chairman of the budget committee has a few things
Certainly.
he's going to say.
Certainly.
No, and I appreciate you putting this together. One of the things that I'm going to be recommending that we move forward before the final budget comes before the commission is that if you look at the salaries and wages, that instead of it being for fiscal year 19, that would be for fiscal year 18. And part of that is because we have so much of a workload. We're moving forward as an agency, and we want to make sure that we're servicing our clients as best as we possibly can. Plus, when we look at that with what we've got going on, it keeps us in line with the other agencies and making sure that we're retaining our staff. So we'll come back with a number of what that impact looks like on an agency-wide staff advancement as far as salary is concerned, but we want to bring that into 18 versus 19. That'll have some implications to some of the other numbers, but with, as you pointed out, the number of transactions we're processing, the volume that we're maintaining, we can see that this is something that is really more forward-looking and allows us to, again, retain those people that we talked about before, which also supports, why we talked about why we need to look at owning our own building so that we can take care of our own people and provide better services to our clients and those people that are part of our agency. So this is that forward-looking step of faith that is very, very prudent and very, very conservative. And I will say, Commissioners, that before we come to you with a forward, we'll have an analysis overall. Commissioner Ayaga, I think you'll appreciate this based on your experience. We'll have an analysis overall of where the employees are at the agency so that we can justify what an appropriate, prudent, yet modest increase would be to make sure we're retaining that talent pool. And we're very excited about going through this process, and it'll help us really maintain a baseline going forward.
At all levels.
At all levels.
So significantly with that, just to kind of bring you up to speed, we actually have the senior staff is working with me to develop a very detailed compensation policy on behalf of the agency. That includes a lot of those considerations, but I'm very pleased that one, we make provisions for the ability to trigger those resources more quickly if we need them. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, to the general public or those watching, our concern is how do we modestly service our license holders and still make sure that we're providing, as our mission talks about, make sure that we're protecting the public. So we've got to make sure we're prudent in that. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget proposal? No action is required at this time. Just wanted the opportunity to explain the direction that we're headed and answer any questions that you had. So you will see, the Budget Committee will see another draft in June, and everyone, all the commissioners will see the results after that in July before the August meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Olmixon.
Okay.
Any other questions? We'll move to agenda item, no, we did 29. We'll move to agenda item
Well, I still need to
30.
make a motion.
I don't think there's any motion this time.
Not even to accept it?
Comes in August, no.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Denise Sample, Licensing Manager. For Agenda Item 30, discussion and possible action to approve new or changes to TREC forms. Form A, BBE RF0, Renewal of Business Entity Broker License, timely or expired less than 6 months, is being revised to add certification that the designated broker has management authority for the business entity. Forms B through D, RF9, Renewal of Individual Real Estate License, timely or expired less than 6 months. INRF2, Renewal of Inspector License, timely or expired less than 6 months. ERW RF7, Renewal Form for Easement or Right-of-Way Agent or Business. These license renewal forms are being revised to better comply with the requirements of 22 TAC, Chapter 1101, 652A1 and A6, to obtain required information regarding a criminal offense involving fraud. Form E, INECE0, Inspector Non-Elective Continuing Education Course Application, is a new form that allows the education provider to submit Inspector Non-Elective CE course applications for TREC's review and approval. And Forms F and G, QEREI1, Qualifying Real Estate Instructor Application, and II1, Qualifying Inspector Instructor Application. These forms are being revised to clarify the types of instructor designations the Commission will accept towards the 8-hour adult education instructor training course requirements for new and renewing real estate and inspector qualifying course instructors.
Commissioner Arriaga, I think it's your turn, but I could be wrong. Commissioner Arriaga, could you make a motion? Yes.
Agenda item number 30. I move the Commission approve new or changes to TREC forms as presented.
Motion to have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Sample.
Thank you.
Agenda item 31. Someone asked for this. Oh, you got this.
So I'm
Madam Chair and Commissioners, if you don't mind, I'll just address you from here. This is essentially a discussion item. I wasn't here at the very end of the last meeting, but I did report that the significant number of license holders who refused to answer the question whether or not they fully understood the difference between the commission and the Association of Realtors. And I think that was one of the items that prompted having this discussion. So there are two things that I want to bring to your attention. So the first one is that between the last meeting and this, we have recorded a series of public service announcements. The recordings will be first posted on our website, and one of those recordings deals directly with the issue of do you understand the difference between the Commission and the Association of Realtors? So are we ready to play that? So if you would listen, please. Do you know the difference between the Texas Real Estate Commission and the Texas Association of Realtors?
No.
If not, don't feel bad. In a 2016 survey of real estate license holders, many Texas brokers and sales agents didn't think they could fully explain all the distinctions. So here's the basics. The Commission is an agency of state government that ensures the 150,000 plus brokers and sales agents licensed in Texas are educated and operate within the state laws and rules. The Realtor Association is a voluntary professional association of over 100,000 real estate license holders whose members hold themselves to a higher code of ethics in their practice. To learn more, contact us at trec.texas.gov. That's trec.texas.gov. Our job is protecting Texans' dreams.
Whose voice is that?
That's mine. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's your TV voice?
So that was my radio voice.
Maybe we should have someone else do it.
Yeah. Commissioner Martinez, you're welcome to come to the studio and give it a whirl. So that is one of several PSAs that we recorded. That first we're going to put on our website, and then distribute information and links to media outlets in case anyone wants to pick that up. Of course, especially radio stations, since it's just an audio file.
Mr. Martinez had a question.
Yes, sir.
Two questions, or one point. Can we add our Twitter handle on there so that way people can make a comment and we can drive more social media traffic? And two, are we prepared for a question about what does this say about our training as far as people getting certified that don't know the difference?
So, two things. The second.
I sincerely asked the question, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a very appropriate question, and I didn't even have to pay you for the setup. But that's the second item, which is that our legal update class that we will be writing after a group of subject matter experts
Being worked on now.
will be writing, and in fact it's already being worked on, has a unit in that class which specifically deals with the differences between the commission, so that our license holders in their mandatory part or non-elective part of their continuing education will get that drilled into them as well. So that is on the very first thing. Both our other presence, our other social media presence, but whether it's Twitter or Facebook, all that. We drive everyone to the website, and on the website, it's a very obvious election to either follow us on one of those others or to go to that resource from the website. So the website's the launch, but you can get onto Facebook from there, or go to Twitter from there, or go to Instagram, or wherever other wonderful places we will be. Every place that there's a demand where we think it's going to be effective communication, we'll have a presence.
Thank you.
Okay?
Test. A exam question would also go a long way in understanding and knowing the difference on the broker's exam.
We'll certainly bring that up with our when we do the exam review this year. And I know many of you have had the opportunity to serve on that, so that's good.
Are you done?
That's all the presentation I need to make, so it's up to you as if I'm done or not.
I think you're done. So, agenda item 32. You talking about this too?
Actually, Commissioner Westcott he had asked for this, and I asked him earlier if he would want to make some introductory remarks here. And I know that also our general counsel just returned from Arello, and so as one of the topics that frequently comes up there is what are other jurisdictions doing about technology-related challenges and opportunities both. So, so she may have something to add here.
So, Commissioner Westcott.
Sure, yeah. I'm glad this is on the agenda, and I think that this is something that we will be seeing a lot more going forward, and so I'm just kind of trying to get us mentally ahead of the curve here a little bit. And the issue is fundamentally this: there's a lot of new actors coming into the marketplace, disrupting the traditional practice of real estate sales and brokerage. Many of these are technology oriented and enabled, and as we have seen in other industries recently, disruption of a industry can occur very, very quickly, perhaps faster than a regulatory board's ability to compensate for it. And there's also the risk of regulatory capture, where traditional actors might use regulation and this agency to prevent marketplace competition and innovation. So those are things that I think we just need to be very thinking about going forward. And I just want to know from Doug that we are ensuring that all these new non-traditional actors are complying with existing regulation, but that we're also, and we will not going forward, serve as a barrier to innovation in the marketplace that may benefit Texas consumers. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
I have three examples that I would like to offer where we have seen the innovation and potential disruption occur and have responded, where this body, this commission, has actually responded very effectively to ensure that we're not overly burdensome, but also not afraid of allowing innovation that actually brings efficiency into the marketplace. And so there's three areas I think where we'll see a lot of activity. One that was fairly recent is the showing app issue. So the ability for folks to arrange for showings for customers and for brokers and agents to arrange for showings for their customers and clients through technology tools. And we put some safeguards in place to ensure that the fiduciary responsibilities of the parties were still being met. And even just at the last meeting, I think we finally we agreed and put in place some rules for unaccompanied that would allow unaccompanied showings that are enabled by technology. And so that's one of those. So I think that was a good example. Lead generation. We have had there's a significant. This is a area of disruption in many industries right now, where online lead generation is happening, and so long as it still fits within the fairly narrow confines of an, or I shouldn't say narrow, as long as it doesn't cross a line, it's to be. It can be used however the industry finds it useful. So The aggregation of eyeballs through lots of online presence, and then the leveraging or the monetizing of those leads to others, so long as it doesn't cross the boundary of looking for a referral without a license. We don't have any issues. We don't have any issues as long as they don't cross that definitional boundary of what is a brokerage activity. Online deal making, okay, putting parties, buyers and sellers together. So we had the example of TREC most recently, owners.com. We responded to that, or we responded to that initiative, and then TREC as well, where they were not sufficiently aware of the consumer protections that are in place in Texas for residential properties, but building on a model that is a commercial REO based online find buyers for these properties on behalf of large institutional sellers, and then try to leverage that into the residential market. And we made them aware of the protections that are here available, and so they modified their business plan significantly here in Texas. So I just wanted to remind you guys that you are reacting, and as those things come to our attention, and we go out looking for them as well. This is one of the areas where being proactive and having an open dialogue, especially with our professional associations, and going out to speak to groups of license holders and inviting information, being known as a place that welcomes inquiries about these kinds of developments. I think we're in the right place, on the right track. Is there always room for improvement? Absolutely. We do need to get our heads kind of wrapped around that this is going to happen faster and faster and faster. And so I commend Commissioner Westcott for bringing that to our attention.
Ms. Lewis, you want to tell us what you heard at the Arello conference? Perhaps.
Basically, I think, again, since we are proactive in Texas, what they're now dealing with is stuff that we've already dealt with. The showing apps was a big topic of conversation, and then the lead generation is another one. But as Doug said, we're already on top of it, aware of it, and trying to help innovation as long as they fit within the statutory framework that we currently have. And until the legislature decides that the disruption's so great that we need to change the statutory structure, well, that's their decision. So, but thank you. Yes, I think Doug covered everything.
Thank you. Do we have any one who wishes to add something to a future agenda? It would be agenda item 33. I believe Commissioner Arriaga, didn't you have a request on the future meeting?
Regarding the August meeting, I think we have tentatively on the 14th. If we can move it a week earlier to the 7th or after the 28th, it would help me.
They've already checked on the 7th for the availability of the room, and that works. So we just need the commissioners to check their calendar and see if they are available on the 7th. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're good. If everybody's good, we're going to move the August meeting to the 7th, off of the 14th and on to the 7th. Everybody understand we're moving the August meeting to the 7th of August. Okay, got that. Thank you very much. Is there anything else to come before this body? Yes, what?
Just for planning purposes.
Okay.
For future planning purposes, the next meeting, of course, November the 13th, is the current projected date. So please keep that in your long-range planner as well.
Okay. Everybody good? The meeting adjourned at 12:56.